This month's Where Did the Road Go is brought to you by 6 amazing individuals. Greg Ross, Billuminati, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? This is part 2 of the primer edition of Where Did the Road Go, and I have here with me Mr. Christopher Ernst.
Hello, everybody.
And we are going to be talking about all things Where Did the Road Go related. We did the first part talking a lot about my experiences and stuff. This part's going to be more on the stance of some of the stuff on the show, I guess is the best way to put it. One of the things it says up on the website, if you go to wheredidtheroadgo.com, is it says it has my view of the paranormal in a sense, and that's that whatever this stuff is, people experience it. They've experienced it across culture and across written history, which means on some level it is a real experience. Now, what that doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It doesn't mean there's a undiscovered ape. It doesn't mean that the dead are visiting us. But there is an experience, a solid experience there that is a human experience that has existed in every culture and time period we know about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's why, when someone says, well, I don't believe in that stuff, it's like, well, what more evidence do you need? I'm not saying you have to believe that it's this or that. You don't have to believe in the interpretation. But to know that this is a human experience that has repeated itself and just been named different things is hard to just throw out.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes it can be hard for people to get to the point of sort of understanding that it is a similar thing that has been sort of given, different names. And I think part of that is, unfortunately, this way that I think academia and, anthropology and just the way things are studied in sort of the postmodern realm really has pushed back against the idea of, there being similarities, sort of logical similarities between things. And I'm completely blanking on the name for this because there is there is an academic name for it. And I should know this. But, it's something that was sort of pushed back upon. And it's this idea that, even though things might seem the same, every culture has a different, reason and something for it, which I think also can be true at the same time. But I think that can be a difficult thing for people to kind of get over, is this idea that, even though we have, it's the same sort of mindset where people say like, oh, the fact that the technology that you found in Egypt was also found in, Central and South America, they're, of course, they must have independently done that. There could never have been any contact between them. Or, or the idea that there can't be some sort of perennial truth or perennial philosophy that, as Aldous Huxley said, that keeps on coming up and over again, that people are kind of, finding common universal truths. That sort of, I think that way of looking at the universe has sort of been poo-pooed, or at least it's out of fashion when it comes to rigorous intellectual and academic debate. And that trickles down. So people, will have, the fact that there is the similarities, and I think you could probably use the umbrella term of like, I don't know, even though shamanic is a term that comes specifically from like Siberian, indigenous culture, that sort of, experience that is spiritual, shamanic, that's sort of the milieu that a lot of this stuff sits into, which again, there's also this really big uncomfortability with, looking at religious and spiritual experience as anything, legitimate. And there has been since like William James. So I think there's a big hurdle these days to try to get people, to think of things and to see those similarities in that way, because there's been a pushback against it.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you look at it in an intellectually honest way, though, you can't deny that people have these experiences. I mean, because you'll get the argument of, well, people are just making it up. So it's like, so people are making up the same thing across culture throughout history and naming it different things, like, or they're having a experience. You know, you see in the 2,000 years ago, you see a light in the sky, you don't think aliens, you're thinking witch, or you're thinking spirit, or you're tagging that type of ship, like sailing ships. I mean, there's records of things like that.
Or a lot of times angels.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now it's aliens. But I mean, it's this, when you look at it, when you strip away the interpretations, the phenomena is the same, which means, yes, people are seeing something in the sky they can't explain.
Yes.
And we can't just toss that out. I mean, you can, but it's intellectually dishonest. And a few, I don't remember how long it was, maybe a year ago. So someone had thrown my name into one of the AI things. I think it was ChatGPT, but I'm not sure. And it started out very accurate and then started talking about me doing audiobooks for Mike Cleland and Joshua Cutchin, which is not a thing. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But I was playing around with it this week or last week, something like that, and I put it in. And it actually has a pretty good assessment of the show. It says, Where Did the Road Go? Is a podcast that delves into various paranormal, supernatural, and unexplained phenomena. Hosted by Soraya Azkath, the show explores topics such as UFOs, cryptids, psychic phenomena, consciousness studies, alternative history, and much more. Azkath also often brings on guests who are experts, researchers, or experiencers in these fields to share their insights, experiences, and theories. The podcast encourages critical thinking and open-minded exploration of topics that may challenge conventional beliefs. Listeners of Where Did the Road Go? Appreciate the depth of the discussions and the diverse range of subjects covered. The show has gained a following within the paranormal community and among those with a curiosity about the mysteries of the universe and human consciousness. It serves as a platform for both entertainment and intellectual exploration of the unknown. And I went, wow, that's exactly it,
Well, I guess what that means is that the information that exists out there on the web about the show is accurate.
Right.
That's what the AI scraped from,
Right,
that's
exactly.
Great.
And a little bit is stuff that I wrote, but in the first paragraph sounds a lot like some of the stuff on the website that I put on there, but the rest of it must have pulled from reviews and other people mentioning the show.
Yeah,
so
that's great. That's pretty cool, actually.
I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
So let's see. Where are we going to go through here? We're going to go through a little bit of our view on some of these things. There was a point where someone had left a comment on one of the shows, and in the show it took me a while to figure this out. In the show, we had completely thrown out the whole disclosure thing. We're like, this is nonsense, so on and so forth. And this guy writes and he says, I hate that you keep disenchanting my world. And I was thinking about him like, how are we disenchanting your world? And then in the same video, and I don't know if we only talked about disclosure, someone else thanked me for re-enchanting their world.
Right.
And I went, how are both of these things true? Like, what's happening here? And then I realized that even though we may throw out the disclosure stuff, we're not throwing out we're not saying there's no UFO phenomena. We're just saying, stop paying attention to these people who are just, leading you with a carrot and are never giving you a payoff.
Right. And I think that, if there is something that somebody can get really in, that somebody does have a vested interest in, or that they find to give them, pleasure or, positive feelings, that if there are people that are kind of poking holes in that, I can totally understand why someone would feel
disenchanted.
Feel disenchanted by that. And but that's totally not the aim of the show at all. I think that all of us who regularly appear on the show very much want to, we would love it if all these things were true,
that, and every once in a while someone will, get down on us for being skeptics. And it's like, well, we're skeptics in the sense that we don't just accept everything without proof. Right. We're open to discussing it, to debating it, but we're not just going to be like, oh, this person said this, so it must be true. The only exception there really is that I will generally not doubt someone's personal experiences.
Yes.
Just because, if they're lying, well, stop lying. It's not it's not necessarily hurting me if you're lying. It's just pointless. And if they are telling the truth, then I don't want them to feel like they can't talk about these experiences. because sometimes these experiences are really freaking weird. And, why that may be is a whole other show. But, I would rather believe someone who's lying than not believe someone who's telling the truth. So when it comes to things like that, I will always err on the side of believing somebody's story. Unless there's a brilliant red flag in the middle of it,
right. And I think that when that happens, you oftentimes sort of raise that, to some degree or another. But and I think that's a good way to, especially if you're dealing with it, like if you're dealing with a phenomenon or any sort of supernatural phenomenon, whatever one might say and criticize about John Mack, I think that the way in which he approached it from a psychiatrist's standpoint, where it was about each person's subjective experience and really, leaving your subjects, I think is the only way to go with it. And I'd be really curious if he hadn't died, what he'd be saying these days. Maybe completely disappoint us and there'd be these terrible things come out about it, but who knows?
But it hasn't, you don't hear the terrible things like you do about, some of the stuff that's come out about Bud Hopkins or
David Jacobs.
Especially David Jacobs. I mean, Bud Hopkins, to me, it seems like Bud believed what he was saying. And his wife said the same thing, his late wife.
Yep.
Carol Rainey said he believed what he was saying, but he was also falsifying data to kind of make his point, and that's something that happens. People do that.
And I think that especially happens with, the UFO phenomena, because as we've seen and we can see, it's something that really overlaps with belief systems and, spirituality and religion and, something that's more faith-based. And I think that a lot of people end up in a realm where they have an agenda they feel is right and they're doing something positive. And I think that's probably what Hopkins thought,
Now, Jacobs is a little harder to figure out because he did some. Yeah. If you listen to the Emma Wood stuff, especially that Jeff Ritzman and Vady did on Paratopia, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe he did believe all the stuff he was saying, but there's some really sketchy stuff in there.
Right, which also is stuff that, if you take it out of the UFO space, it's like, oh yeah, people, men in positions of power behaving this way is nothing new, so I it's not hard for me to take all of the evidence and say, sure, I'm sure that happened. Yeah.
And I know people like Peter Robbins who will say, well, he was always been a really nice guy. I've never seen this, but Peter's also a white guy, not a woman.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean,
and Peter also, he has his own, for a long time he was, and I think was very honest about it. He came out about the Left at Eastgate, in that book and the authenticity of that. And I think that's what a good researcher should do. So,
with his co-author there, whose name is escaping me, who turned out
completely spacing on it too now, right? This has to do with, for people that are not familiar, there was this book on the Rendlesham Forest incident that Peter did with one of the people who
Larry
allegedly
Warren.
Said they were there. Larry Warren, yep.
And Larry was apparently there for some of it, but initially Peter checked all of the stuff that Larry was saying, and it all checked out. And at a certain point, Peter decided, well, he's telling me the truth, and he stopped checking.
Right.
And then Warren started lying.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that set Peter off eventually is that Larry Warren would put stuff up, I think he said on eBay. And one of the things he put up was Peter's sister's guitar or something with it autographed. Yeah. And he's like, that's not real. Yeah. And then he's looking and realizing some of the other stuff he had up there were fakes. And then I don't know where the discussion went, but, he started double checking some of the stuff Larry told him later on. It was like, I was duped.
And it happens.
Yes, it absolutely does.
I think that, admitting it and moving, this is thing that you have to do, and mistakes that you make. Yeah, I very much respect that.
And as far as the Emma Wood stuff, Emma she recorded all the sessions with Jacobs.
And with Jacobs, yes.
Those are all up on, last I knew, they were all up online, and you can hear, it's what's the right word for it? It's not morally wrong, it's ethically wrong.
It is ethically wrong, and from just sort of a base standpoint, it's creepy, man.
Yes,
it's skeevy. We all know what this is like. Yeah,
and even the whole, and he gets into this whole thing where he's getting instant messages from hybrids who are threatening him. And you look at this from a disconnected viewpoint of not being like in the middle of it. You're just going, what? This is just this is a bad movie script, like a really bad movie script,
Well, I mean, I feel like these days, if you look at how, and this has always been the case, but I think it's become more apparent, the crossover between sort of conspiracy and the ability of people to bake information and evidence in whatever way they want. That's always been there, Bill Cooper, whatever you want to say. It's just become a lot more prevalent, and it's in the public sphere these days now too. So,
So the two things that apply here, one is hypnosis. Hypnosis has been proven not to be a reliable memory recovery tool. If you can't check the data that's being recovered under hypnosis, it cannot be relied on. It is not acceptable in court. I didn't know this. I didn't know this until Paul Kimball told me this. But again, if you go to Paratopia, they have a psychologist on who's an expert in hypnosis, and he explains, hypnosis is basically a behavioral modification tool. We don't actually know what it is or how it works. It's an altered state of consciousness. Red Pill, one of our regular co-hosts, had made the comment that maybe that altered state is creating some of these experiences that people think they're recalling.
Right.
But it brings into question everything that was written about the UFO phenomena that was brought out under hypnosis.
Yep.
And it tarnishes all of that because we don't know if it's true or not. And there's the whole alien hybrid, the whole abduction thing, all of that stuff was based mainly around Bud Hopkins and Jacobs and eventually Mack. And their hypnosis sessions.
Yep.
So you don't see much of that type of thing happening on conscious recall.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to say, okay, this is not what it looks like. And sometimes that upsets people. They don't understand why we will not take that as, a thing that's happening. Because again,
right. There are even some people that you have that are on, like, whenever Mike's on, Mike Cleland, he does have, I think, a slightly different view of hypnosis, and part of that comes from his personal experience. And even though you and Aaron, I'm just thinking of like the UFO shows you do with those guys. It's even though you might disagree, like you'll have a conversation about it and talk about it from both perspectives.
Absolutely.
But all the stuff you're saying really does come from if you do research into hypnosis. All of what you said is very accurate. Yeah.
And Jenny Randalls, who's a UK researcher, who's not very active anymore, unfortunately. I've tried repeatedly to get her on the show.
She's great.
She basically pushed for UFO organizations in the UK to not use hypnosis because she personally tested it based on some event in her past when she was younger that she did not remember all the details of. So she was hypnotized to remember the details, and the information was available. That's the thing. She could verify whether the memories were correct or not. The stuff she consciously remembered came out the same under hypnosis. The rest of the stuff that she didn't remember was completely wrong. Like it bared no resemblance to reality. So when she actually saw the documents of what happened, she went, yep, that's not what I recalled under hypnosis. Hypnosis is bunk. We cannot use this to recover memories.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't anything paranormal that she was recovering. Yeah. These were normal. I don't know if she ever said what the event was, but she didn't remember it consciously. So there is a case, however, that came out of like California where a bus driver was hypnotized to remember, or was it a bus driver? Someone was hypnotized to remember the license plate of a bus and accurately recalled it under hypnosis.
Sure. So, which is not to say that can't happen sometimes.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah. And maybe the fact that they were able to verify it because they found the vehicle afterwards, maybe that is, somehow in the same way that psychic information goes backwards, when you're in a hypnotic state, it's backfeeding to you.
Yep. Or maybe in that type of, hypnagogic state that this person was in, they simply were relaxed enough to have that recall. Because I do think that there is some validity to there being, memories that exist that we don't have conscious access to, that are existing in our unconscious. Yeah. So that isn't to say that that can't happen. So, if anybody's, I think, feeling that's being said, not at all. It's the tool of hypnosis itself.
Yes. I feel like memory works on like platters. Like if you're on the same platter with the information that you're looking for, you can remember it. But if you're on a different platter, you're going, what was that again?
Yeah, for sure.
And then when you get back to that platter, you're like, oh yeah, okay.
And I like thinking of it too. I mean, if you apply the simulation theory, which you recently had a show on, it's something that comes up a lot, is this idea, the video game analogy, where if you're level 1, you're going to know different things and you might not have full memory access to, whatever the backstory of the character is. But if you're, I don't know, level 5 or 10 or something like that, and you've progressed through the game, maybe you're going to have a different type of knowledge. And that's one of the ways that simulation theory and sort of reincarnation theory overlap, is that, maybe different people in different realms of the game, if you're talking about simulation theory, have access to a different, portion of memory. Maybe that has to do with why some people remember past lives, some don't.
This is why we don't delve into the hypnotic stuff. And we will have people on occasionally who have been hypnotized, like Mike. I mean, Mike recovered some past life memories under hypnosis. He said even if they're not true, it helped him deal with stuff. So that's fine.
Sure.
He has that understanding of it.
Yep.
Peter, who is part of the Ghost Hunters of the Finger Lakes, is currently working on a book where they have a whole bunch of people they hypnotically regress to remember past lives. And he said in some cases they have evidence that those lives were real. I haven't read the book. It's not done yet. So, I mean, I'm open to that. I mean, if you can, it doesn't mean that those people necessarily had those lives. Maybe they're picking up that information otherwise, but it's still interesting if you can actually prove that, because he's like, I think he told me like, some people remember lives in Atlantis. I'm like, okay, we don't even know if Atlantis really existed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's like that's hard to parse out as whether or not that's valid. But if you have someone in historical time that there's records for, and those records match up with what they hypnotically recalled, that's interesting.
It is interesting. Yes. I mean, I am still I have always been skeptical about past life stuff that comes from hypnosis.
So am I.
The more interesting stuff is stuff that hasn't. It's like the kids that remember it, or people that have dreams, or something like that. But it's, you're right.
So, I mean, that's sort of the show's stance on hypnosis. Obviously, it varies per guest, but that's my stance, and I think most of the people who are regular on the show have that basic stance on hypnosis.
Yes.
And then, as far as disclosure goes, the thing about disclosure is this is something that's been going on for decades. It changed, and it barely changes face. This is the thing. It's a lot of the same people over and over again making similar claims and constantly moving the goalposts, saying, well, next month there's going to be a big, earth-shattering revelation. And then the earth-shattering revelation really isn't anything. And they're like, but wait 2 more months and something major is going to happen. And then it just keeps getting pushed back. And there's never anything definitive that comes out. They'll release these videos that are not good quality. And they're like, look, this leaked. It's like, and it doesn't really prove anything,
Right. And it's really almost even the same script.
Yes.
Too, that comes out again, if not the same characters. People that are recently I saw sort of in the social media sphere, in the small sort of lurker space that I'm in, because I'm not really on there, but going on there to kind of see what's up. Like people are, putting videos of Doty, Richard Doty. And if anybody has any idea who that is, he is like the Benedict Arnold. Now he's not a traitor, but he's famous in that way. Like if you've been looking at UFOs and been, interested in it for a long time, that this guy is a disinformation agent through and through. This is what he does. He lies about UFOs, and people are quoting him as, truth. And it's the same thing with what's recently happening with all of this sort of governmental disclosure too, is that, not that I don't want it to be true, but just because I've been looking at this for decades, it's the same thing that's happening. It seems to be, to me, that the politicians that are part of it are just using it, in the same way that I've, seen it being used before, for a political gain. It's a topic that people are interested in.
Yep.
And it's the same type of information that's, this sort of that's coming out, these quote unquote whistleblowers that, arrive and have this, information that they heard from somebody, but, they weren't really there in the first place. This this happened in the 90s. This happened in the aughts. This happened in the 80s,
Yeah. It's, and that's it. It's like, well, this guy says that he knows for sure because somebody told him that they saw this.
Yeah.
But he didn't see it. So, it's now secondhand information. How can he be sure?
Yeah.
And Doty, I was actually just listening to the Paratopia that came out. And Jeremy Vaney has all the Paratopias up on his channel, Our Undoing Radio. So if you want to hear those, they're not all up. He's been putting them up since Jeff died. He's been putting them up like one a week. And he just had Mark Pilkington on.
Yes, Mirage.
So this was from he wrote Mirage Man, and there's a documentary that's definitely worth watching.
Absolutely.
And this is like 2011, and Jeremy brings up Doty. And he goes, I wonder what that guy's doing now. I mean, he's just so irrelevant anymore. And here we are, 10, 12 years later, and now Doty's back doing the exact same thing he was doing then.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's the reason we don't really take this disclosure stuff seriously. And I'll see people, I saw someone on Twitter or something say, the government has announced that we have alien or that there's alien technology out there and nobody cares. And I'm like, what? What part of the government said this? And it was the two guys who were on the ship who saw the Tic Tac who said, we don't have tech like that. And I'm like, that is not the government coming out and saying there's alien technology.
Yeah.
But this is the line that gets towed. Yep. And until they put out something solid and the actual government says, yes, we have alien technology, it's not disclosure.
Yeah.
And even if they do, there'll be some level of, but are they telling us the truth, or is this more disinfo somewhere along the lines?
Yeah, right.
We can fly you to Saturn in 2 minutes. Okay, I believe you now,
Yeah.
Either that or you've been really working on this technology in secret for a while.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we don't really deal with disclosure on the show. And we've done enough shows on it. And also you can read stuff like Greg Bishop's Project Beta. And your friend, Golightly. What's the name of his book?
Yep, Saucer Spooks and Kooks is a good one. Yep.
As well as Jacques Vallée's.
Steve Berwick just had Go Rightly on if people want to talking about that book specifically. And then you obviously, we did a show. I think I was on with you, when it first came out.
Yep. And as well, Jacques Vallée's Messengers of Deception is an excellent book on this too.
Yes, absolutely is.
So as far as things we don't deal with on the show, although occasionally people seem to think we do, we don't talk about politics.
Right.
Every once in a while, someone might declare, like you might say you lean left, but you're saying that not because you're advocating it so much as explaining your viewpoint.
Right. People might think I do, but I don't even know if I'd say that at this point. Like I try to stay away from. This is what I would say politically. Do not trust politics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
right, exactly. And I think I think there are people in terms of that type of thing. Yeah, I think most of the people that are on here, even if they have a leaning socially or something like that, or even fiscally towards that, are we don't get wrapped up in the sort of what I would say would be, the political manipulations that are very easy to fall into, Yeah.
So one of the rules of the show is no politics, but it doesn't stop people from occasionally, like I think Mike made an anti-Trump comment and someone got all upset about it. And I was like, do I censor him? I mean, that's where, he didn't go on and on about it. It was one line. And I was like, I could have cut it out, but I feel like I shouldn't have to censor him. If he wants to say it, it's his right. It wasn't anything really offensive,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really okay to not like politicians, everybody. It used to be, I feel, so much easier to do that.
So officially, the show has no political agenda. It has no official political stance. The regular people on this show vary from right to left in their political stance, and I don't really have a political stance, to be honest. Like you just said, I mean, I think it's all a mess. I think we need to pull from both sides of the spectrum and get people in there who actually want to help people.
Yeah, I mean, get rid of the parties.
Yes,
that's as far as I'll go.
Yeah. So that's why we don't deal with that. We rarely deal with religion, but we will occasionally deal with religious history.
Right. Yes. No religious dog. I don't think there's anybody that comes on that has a particular religious dogma which does happen. I mean, very much so. I think there are people that, come into podcasts about UFOs or the supernatural that have assumptions that they think are true, in particular religious spaces. Then I don't think anybody that's on here brings any of that to the table, even if they have it.
And I mean, I am totally okay having someone like Timothy Renner, who's a good friend, on talking about his Catholicism and his podcast on saints as well. I'm perfectly okay with Amber coming on and talking about like the history of demons and her experiences with people on the extreme right.
Absolutely.
Religious right. I mean, it's not even though we don't really deal with religion, if that topic is part of the conversation, the experiences that the person had, I'm not going to censor that.
Sure. And at least in Tim's case, he's dealing with it too from a sort of mysticism, from the side of Christian mysticism. And I think that it's really difficult to sort of parse paranormal and supernatural things out from the mysticism of like all religions, honestly, be it Hindu or Muslim or, Christian, like mysticism is the supernatural aspect of spirituality. And it's, but it comes in here, I think, into conversation without any dogma, which is something I appreciate.
Yeah. And we're not here to ridicule anyone's beliefs or, because I always liked Crowley's statement that religion's the same mountain viewed by different people from different sides with different paths to the top, but it's still the same mountain.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd even go so far as to say like the religion itself, for me at least, I think it's important to realize that religion is something that oftentimes is created by the humans that are trying to, preserve some sort of mystical or numinous or supernatural experience that they had. And humans are fallible, so things can become, injected by human emotions and greed and interests pretty easily.
So even if you hear us talk about, like we have a show called Everything's Demons, and this comes from reality TV. It was the reality TV shows that started with things like Ghost Hunters, and Ghost Hunters didn't really do the demons thing so much, but Paranormal State, Ghost Adventures, shows like that, like demons became a very popular thing for them to find.
Yeah, and it was like a very specific kind of like 20th century Christian demon too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anything weird that happened, it must be a demon. It's either a ghost or a demon, and it's like, all right. And then you get people who think that anything paranormal is demonic. And especially from a Christian viewpoint, I mean, there is stuff out there,
I think from Christian, a lot of and from other religions, particularly Orthodox, I think you get that. Yeah.
Because it says, this anything paranormal is from the devil. Okay. Yeah. But we're not going to treat stuff as everything is demons. And even the concept of demons, as I said, go back and listen to the show Amber, Witch of Nakalula, did with me, where she talks about the history of how daemons, who were inspirational spirits, got turned into demons that are evil spirits. It's not out of the question that there's stuff out there that wants to harm us. But I always use the example of a cat. I mean, a cat to us, if you like cats, and most people seem to like cats a lot, they're adorable, they're cuddly, they're cute, but to a mouse, that thing is evil.
Right.
That thing.
Do you know about, to go on, I'm not going to take too much on this, but going a quick aside, do you know about the cat, the history of cat murders in Europe in the Middle Ages?
No, I don't think so.
It's crazy. So it used to be, and that, and this is up until recently, like in fact, there's a woman who sort of was the progenitor of esoteric Nazism. And one of the reasons why she began to hate humans so much is because she saw how people in her French town would, for sport, murder cats.
Oh.
And I guess there used to be this practice because people thought in more Christian European communities and countries in the Middle Ages and up until, I guess, recently, that they thought cats, were demonic. And so there was this, like, it was okay for like feral cats to, if there's some place in Paris where they still have this tradition where you go on top of a cathedral and you throw a stuffed cat off to its death after lighting it on fire. I guess it's because people used to actually take cats, light them on fire. Sorry, I'm laughing because it's just so horrible, and throw them off the top of this cathedral. So yeah, just a little history aside for everybody. If you're interested in cat torture and murder,
I'd rather not know about that, honestly.
Right? Isn't that crazy? I heard about that recently. Ugh.
Wow. I mean, humans have done some pretty evil things. And that's the thing. There's plenty of evil from humans without invoking demons into the question.
Right. Yeah. And cats are demons.
Cats are what?
Cats are not demons. Well,
I mean, some of them are. I'm pretty sure. But to a mouse, a cat is certainly going to be a demon, or some kind of evil entity. So, I mean, this stuff is relative. There could be stuff out there in the spiritual ecosystem that, just wants to feed off of us.
Yes, indeed.
The other thing is we don't have all the answers. We're asking questions. We're discussing those questions. We're philosophizing about it. We're looking at new data. At no point are we saying, hey, we have the answers to all this weird stuff.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
If anything, I hope to, find ways to better interact with this stuff and better questions to ask so that we can learn more about it. But there's no static belief or dogma here. So that's why I say, I mean, there could be something out there that's feeding on us, but there also may not be. I'm open to both of those things being equally possible. Let's see what else. So reality TV. Yeah. So the reality TV thing, I mean, the upside is it did make this stuff more accessible to people and made people more comfortable talking about it in public because the shows were so popular. But unfortunately, for the most part, the shows are garbage. The early Ghost Hunter stuff was pretty decent. But even so, they were like, "Wow, we're taking this scientifically, trying to prove that ghosts are dead people." And it's like, that's not how that works. You're going in with the belief you're trying to prove.
Yeah.
Rather than we're going in to collect data and see what this data tells us. But they collected some interesting stuff until all these other shows started popping up, and it was very clear they also had to start faking things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get shows like Ancient Aliens that take stuff out of context and are just, I mean, it's just for ratings. I mean, these shows, entertainment. Yeah, these shows are not looking to deep dive into this stuff. And we are. That is the goal here, is to deep dive into this stuff and find, like I said, better questions. And I take that from Greg Bishop. He is the one that said we need better questions. And I went, yes, that is exactly what we need.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the approach it's much more existential and philosophical. And I think, I believe that the podcast is even classified as such, as philosophy rather than approaching it for thrills. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like spooky stuff and things that make people, feel thrilled and, the same thing, going to a haunted house or that approach to the supernatural, completely like no judgment on it. I think it's just a matter of interest. Yes. And some people might be interested in both.
And it's also, I think it's important that we also discuss the difference between proof, facts, belief, and data.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are very few things that are facts, because things are very relative for the most part. Even if you walk up to someone and you punch them in the face, you could say, well, it's a punch. It's a fact that you punched that person in the face, but then you have to say, but is your memory accurate?
Right. Sure.
Their face is swollen up. Okay, well, that's evidence towards the fact that this actually happened, but it's not. It's very hard to come across facts. Proof as well. I mean, people will see, get video of weird light in the sky, and they're like, oh, it's proof of aliens. It's like, no, it's not. It's proof that they got a light on camera. We don't know what that light is. Thus, we don't, it's not proof of anything. And this, again, is part of that whole disclosure problem, is that we get these blurry videos and we're like, well, we don't know what that is. It must be aliens. And it's like, that's not how this works.
No.
Ghost hunters going out and getting EVPs. Oh, we've proved that ghosts exist. No, you've proved that you caught an anomalous voice on a tape recording, which is interesting. It's data is what it is. Collecting data is one thing. How good that data is varies. And belief is saying it's a ghost or it's a UFO. That's your belief talking, not the evidence, not the data. It is not a fact.
And if people want to say it and speculate, I mean, I think that, the show is very open to speculation as long as people are, saying they're speculating. And as somebody who comes at this from, I think the most concrete, position I come at all this stuff is probably as a documentary filmmaker, which is, loosely put, I'm not approaching this as a scientist. I'm approaching this as an artist. And, for me, at least, I think that, and this is something that, I think comes up in conversation a lot when it comes to the supernatural, or at least, even to things like philosophy and magic and the occult, is that, approaching it from all different angles, that you want to have a scientific approach as well as an artistic approach, as well as maybe another, like an anthropological, cultural approach, or religious approach or something. And I think that that's when you're dealing with something that's not physics, and even maybe sometimes when you are dealing with something like physics, you want to have all of those different viewpoints weighing in on it, because you might learn things, even though the scientific method is absolutely fantastic. And I love the fact that my iPhone exists because, you also have the design that went into that. Like, Steve Jobs, even though he was, ostensibly kind of I hear a terrible human being from listening to Behind the Bastards, is that, he was not a scientist, or he was more of like an aesthetics guy. Like, he was the reason why Apple was the way it was aesthetically. And, a lot of people say that that's, one of the reasons why they think it was so successful, is that it wasn't being approached by this, completely logical scientific mind.
Right. Interesting. I have not listened to those episodes of Behind the Bastards, which is a very
I only mentioned that because I know that you're a fan of the podcast as well.
Yeah, I don't listen to all their episodes. I'm very picky about it.
No, not all of them, but some of them, yeah.
So yeah, as far as other things, one of the, you could almost do a drinking game with the number of times I bring up the Seth material. But that's because it had a big influence on me, and I find it relevant to a lot of the stuff we're talking about. And I feel like I'm being negligent if I don't point out that, oh, well, Seth's take on it was this, and that actually makes sense. We did do a few shows on Seth at the beginning of this year, and I would refer people to those because I don't want to end up doing another show right now on Seth. But yes, Seth was channeled material. I'm generally very skeptical of channeled material. Seth was the first thing I ever read when I went, oh, this is actually interesting. And that seems to be a lot of other people's takes too, where they were like, It
is very interesting. Yeah. And Seth is also really important historically from the standpoint of, like, it is a seminal part of, like, modern New Age, which is honestly a big part of, the sort of the paranormal, supernatural UFO world. I mean, a lot of this intersects. It's very, intersectional, to use the term. So Seth is, I think, very important to look at, both historically and sort of, philosophically interesting.
Other things we will talk about on this show occasionally deal with the occult and magical practices. As from my own view, I have my own particular form of magical practice that has worked very well for me. It's something else I also did not believe in. I knew people who were into Wicca and stuff like that, and one day decided I'm going to try, one of these magical rituals and see if anything happens, and very quickly realized that, it does actually seem to work. And I've had some pretty startling results where like goes way beyond any type of coincidence, where I'm like, okay, so there's something to this, whether it just be our effect on reality or whatever. I mean, we've taken apart different ideas of what and how this stuff works. And
it's a big part of UFO history too. I mean, Jack Parsons, which if people are not aware of that, he was a student and acolyte of Aleister Crowley, famous Magick with a K guy who synthesized sort of Tantra and Kabbalah into this Western, esoteric tradition that was kind of built on theosophy, which we've talked about before too. There's a lot of connections. Again, it's this intersection of all these things that you can't, again, this is why I think oftentimes, many of us are skeptical when people approach the UFO question from simply a quote unquote nuts and bolts angle, which I would actually say more of a martial angle or military angle at this point, because I feel like that's what it ends up being, is this sort of like military viewpoint on it, is because it's not using all of these different ways to inform it. And I mean, this is something Jacques Vallée would himself say that you should be doing if you read his books. You know, you have to look at it from all these different angles in order to kind of get a sense. You can't just have there be one way of looking at it.
Yeah, that is accurate. And also when it comes to UFO experiences and the abduction experiences in particular, I feel like what you're seeing there, and I could be completely wrong, obviously, as I could be on any of this stuff, but
Right.
I think you're seeing a basically what native cultures would call a shamanic awakening, or a shamanic type experience that, because of hypnosis and stuff, gets hijacked into being a scary experience.
Right.
Also, the book, I think we talked about it last time, The Invisible Gorilla comes up a lot, and one of the things
Yes.
that they talk about is how memory works, and when you are hypnotized, memories recovered under hypnosis are actually stronger than normal memories.
Yeah.
So if you're hypnotically regressed and you experience a scary UFO encounter, that's going to feel more real than most of your memories, even if it never happened.
Right. Right.
And then it's going to shade those experiences in the future. So if this is some part of the universe trying to wake us up into something deeper, and it's being hijacked by someone hypnotizing you and making you afraid of it, that's obviously the wrong direction.
And if this is a film that we've discussed, and Red Pill Junkie Miguel has brought up many times, this film Witness to Another World, which came out, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, is a really great example of a film about the UFO phenomenon. Jacques Vallée is in it, and it's about a South American farmer and his experiences, and it very much, approaches it, and, from again, the word shamanic standpoint, but this idea of the impact of the experience on people and memory and perception and culturally how it was dealt with. It's a good film if anybody wants to look at it and hasn't heard about it before.
So one of the other things I bring up a lot is the electric universe.
Yes.
If you want to learn more about that, go to thunderbolts.info. They have tons of videos and stuff up. It is a different idea of what runs the universe, basically, and they're pretty good with predicting things. Like when we sent probes out, or when we looked at the center of the Milky Way, their predictions turned out to be right, whereas mainstream science were wrong.
Yeah, and for anybody that is, and I don't know, if you're familiar with recently, Terrence Howard, the actor, and his sort of what he's been doing recently. I don't know if you're familiar.
No,
I'm
not.
He's always kind of been, into that, as a friend of mine who would say this sort of like, I don't know, it's a pan Egyptian, I guess Hotep is the word that I've heard people use in Black culture, that it's essentially, and maybe I'm using that incorrectly and that's derogatory, but I've heard friends of mine use it, and that it's essentially like, he's very interested in a lot of the sort of alternative theories having to do with energy and stuff like that. And he was on Rogan recently, and he's kind of espousing electric universe theory, but like through his own weird filter where he's like 1 + 1 × 1 = 2. Like he has this new math that he's come up with. I don't know. It's this big sort of cultural thing that, at least in pop culture, people have been talking about it and making fun of it and making fun of him and stuff like that. But what's funnily enough is that, like, I listened to a little bit of it. I'm like, this is the electric universe theory, that he's talking about. He's just like completely got it wrong. And he's like, it's going through his weird, some sort of weird thing. So he must have come across it at some point, because I think he is researching all of this alternative, science and stuff like that. So he's coming across these sort of intersections with stuff that we've talked about in the show. But it's I find it funny that, at least going through, because he was on Rogan recently, you're basically getting this sort of incorrect interpretation of electric universe, which is going out to millions and millions of people.
and I've had the late Walt Thornhill on at least twice.
Yeah.
And we just recently did the what was the name of it? Godstar. We did a show on the book Godstar. I cannot remember the guy's name who wrote it, but he has also passed away a few years ago, so we were doing more of a book report style, and we're going to do a part 2 to that when I can get through the rest of the book. because it's really interesting stuff. It may not be accurate, it may not be true, but there are interesting questions in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with the electric universe, it's probably not exactly how things work, but it seems to work as a predictive model better than the standard model that science is using, and they're just not open to even looking at it. And it's to me, that's intellectually dishonest.
It's very interesting. I mean, a lot of it I don't understand completely, but it's pretty interesting, and I think very well sort of researched.
So, and stuff that has, so the way we throw around ideas on here, different stuff has come out through here, because we're not trying to prove anything. And I think this is one of the mistakes that a lot of groups make, where they're like, we want to prove, ghosts. We want to prove that we're not trying to prove anything. We're just exploring it. We're not, like I said, I don't know that there even is an answer we can comprehend here. But we can definitely look at things in different ways. And one of the things that I had realized at some point is the idea of Bigfoot and the wilderness poltergeist. And this occasionally gets dropped, mentioned as being Joshua Cutchin's idea, because Josh ran with it. He actually named it. But I had pointed out that, these experiences people have in the woods where they don't actually see a Bigfoot, and possibly sometimes even when they do, are very, very similar to poltergeist accounts.
Yeah.
And I think it was on a show with Josh and Tim. And, Josh is like, oh, wilderness poltergeist. And so he started talking about it. And then next thing I know, it's in books as Josh's idea. And I'm like, what? No, that was okay.
Josh will admit that. I think when you get him on here, though.
He has. So it's, and
he will admit,
the thing I didn't realize is that's the idea that broke both of them out of the flesh and blood Bigfoot mode.
Right. Yeah. Him and Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. Both. And I didn't know that. Like, I don't think they specifically told me that. They just became more open to it. When I asked Tim one day, I'm like, why did you give up the flesh and blood Bigfoot? And he went, well, that's your fault. Because, you pointed out this whole wilderness poltergeist thing, and you were right. Again, we don't know what that means exactly, but you see poltergeist activity connected to all of this stuff. And poltergeist activity, if nothing else, the energy from it can be us. So
yes,
it could be us generating something unconscious, or it could be something from the outside using that energy, or something else entirely. I don't know. But that's the kind of thing I want to do with this show. That ended up with 3 books being written, the 2 volumes of Where the Footprints End, because both Josh and Tim started delving into these more paranormal Bigfoot encounters. And those books are phenomenal. They have so much, and they learned so many new things in those books. If you have not read those books, they are must reads. And more recently, Travis Watson wrote The Forest Poltergeist. And he actually wrote me and asked me if it was okay if he wrote a book about it. I mean, it's not like, just as a respectful sort of thing, which was awesome of him, because I wasn't going to write that book. And then, and speaking of Strange Familiars, too, the connection between this show and Strange Familiars, because people seem to know they're connected sometimes, but they don't know exactly the history because it goes back so far. Initially, I had Tim on for his first book, which was something with the Seventh Gate. I can't remember.
Beyond the
name.
Seventh Gate.
Beyond, is that it? Okay.
I think so. And I have it right here. Yeah, Beyond the Seventh Gate, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And so, initially I looked at it and I said, oh, this is going to be full of urban legends and stuff. And it is. It's debunking those urban legends. And then looking at the actual stuff that may have inspired those urban legends. And I went, this is great. This guy's fantastic. I need to have him on immediately. And then we became friends, and he had wanted to do, this is an interesting circle with you, he had wanted to do a documentary because he knew I did some filmmaking, but I don't really do documentaries. I do music stuff. I've made a couple of movies and stuff, but documentaries, I'm like, I don't know how to really do a documentary about this stuff. And I said, why don't you just do a short podcast about it?
Yep.
And then he ended up going, well, maybe I'll just do a podcast about, local folklore and stuff. And that is what became Strange Familiars. And when he sent me the first episode, he's like, tell me what you think. And it was good. And it was different than what I was doing. And I said, if you want, I'll run this on the Where Did the Road Go channels.
Yeah.
So everyone who was listening to Where Did the Road Go then got Strange Familiars. And that's...
I remember when that happened. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of people thought, oh, are you two doing this together? But it was just that I was trying to get him an audience.
Yeah, no, you were it's like, acting as his record label.
Right. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Right.
And he got to the point where he didn't need that anymore. I mean, his show took off. It's a great show. It had, a right place, right time. And he's doing.
And it has its own unique sort of voice and style, which is, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the connection between those two. When I first started this show, it was just interviews. And then the first thing I did that I branched out with, and I owe these guys, both these guys, huge thanks, is Micah Hanks and Paul Kimball started doing a regular, like, midweek version of the show.
Yep.
So the show is aimed at making sure that not aimed at, there has always been a new show every Saturday night to run on WVBR. And people were like, we want more. And then I thought, well, I really like talking to Micah and I really like talking to Paul, and they can talk about all kinds of stuff. So we started doing a midweek podcast where I'd have one or the other on, usually alternating. And that went on for a little bit. Micah did a huge amount of helping me get things going in the beginning. He had me on his show, The Gralien Report, which is now the Micah Hanks Show. So huge thanks to him. And Paul also, gave me a lot of help on direction of things and stuff. And he was actually the one, I read his book, The Other Side of Truth, which is a very good book. And in it, he's talking about his personal paranormal experiences. And I had considered writing a book, but I thought, I don't know if anyone would be interested. And then I read Paul's and I went, actually, this is really interesting. Maybe I could do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to Paul about it. He's like, if you do it, I'll publish it. Because he was running a publishing company at the time. I don't know if he still does.
Right.
And I was like, oh, because self-publishing wasn't quite as big as it is now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And, I had written a good chunk of it before Mike asked me what was going on in my life when I saw that giant UFO, and that changed everything. And I had to go back and start from scratch. But the whole idea of doing an autobiography and writing down these experiences, in a more public forum comes from Paul Kimball, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
You have done a documentary on myself in this show.
Yeah.
And what is the name of it?
So that's the name of it is Magicians Long to See, which is I cribbed from Twin Peaks.
Yes.
The Twin Peaks poem. But that's just, because I like David Lynch, just nothing to do with that. But the idea also too is that, as when I showed my wife the film and she really had no idea what it was about, she was like, this is a film just about the human condition, about like humans and like what people go through. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And I think that all of us, like, in the world that, especially those that are, maybe drawn to a podcast like Where Did the Road Go? There's a certain level of sort of seeking going on, or exploration, like you said before. And I think that that as a profile of you in the show, it sort of shows that exploratory and seeking motif that comes through in both you, your life, what you're interested in, and then what you explore through the show itself.
And it will be hopefully on Amazon at some point.
I hope so. Yeah. I just finished it. And so it showed at a couple of festivals outside of the US, and it should hopefully show at some within the US. It's, it's in consideration for some, but then, hopefully it'll be streaming soon for people too. We got to go through the process of getting it up there.
On the other hand, if you want to see it now, you can become a patron. It's only $3 a month to become a patron, and it is available to watch on there.
It is.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here. First of all, I want to talk about a couple things that we didn't get to in this episode and didn't think about until afterwards. There are two other co-hosts that we had over the years that were fairly regular at one point, and that was Taylor and Ren. Both of them will occasionally come back on. Taylor, I think, is doing a gaming podcast at the moment, and Ren can be found as a Liminal Bird on Twitter, as well as liminalroom.com. Couple of quick things here. So when people are looking for proof, I feel like that's the wrong way to approach this stuff. We know it exists. What we don't know is what it is. If you're trying to prove it's aliens, okay, that's one thing. But if you're trying to prove that UFOs, unidentified flying objects, exist, well, they do. There's plenty of stuff out there we don't know what is. The question is, can you prove your theory of what it is? And in all likelihood, there's a number of different things going on. So, yeah, I don't feel the need to prove anything. I don't need to feel like, oh, science needs to take us seriously when we do this paranormal research. They can if they want. It's not for them, as far as I'm concerned. This is the paranormal, whatever this stuff is, tends to be a very personal experience. It doesn't need the validation of scientists or authorities or anything else to have meaning to the individual. And also I want to say that everyone's opinions that you hear on this show, they're their own opinions. Everyone has different paths in life, and they've had different experiences and different reasons they view things the way they do. Not a single one of us has had the same life experiences and can see things the same way. So just because you hear someone express an opinion on here, and you don't necessarily hear me argue with them or put up a dissenting comment or whatever, does not mean I agree with them. I'm just allowing them to express themselves and say what they say. I don't necessarily want to censor anyone unless they're being offensive, and I've really never come across that. So yeah, people's opinions are their own, and that's where that stays. So you're not going to hear a lot of censorship, but you're going to hear a variety of viewpoints. And those viewpoints belong to the people expressing them. All right. Contact info, wheredidtheroadgo.com. Everything's there. If you want to submit a story, stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And we will either have you on, or we'll talk about it in a listener stories episode. Or if you just want to talk to me about something that happened to you, that's fine too. You can do that as well. You can become a patron for only $3 a month. It helps out the show greatly, and you get extra content all month long. And you get the show a week early. Social media links are up there. There's a Discord, Facebook page, Facebook group, an X page, formerly Twitter. There's a Reddit as well that really just ends up with the shows posted, but I totally would be fine if it was more than that. So all those links, wheredidtheroadgo.com, including a full show archive. I also want to shoot out a special thank you to Natalie Grew, who has numerous times edited these shows. I don't do a lot of editing. Most of the time, what you're hearing is the pure, unedited conversation. But every once in a while, there's a need for things to be edited for one reason or another. A lot of times, it's just sound issues, and she does an amazing job with this stuff. She's kind of magic when she touches this stuff. So if anyone needs stuff edited, she's the person to contact. You can contact me, and I'll put you in touch with her. And as far as audio editing goes, she is a master of that stuff. And she has definitely helped me out on a handful of shows here and there where I needed some editing done. All right, and finally, in this long mid-segment here, recommendation. My recommendation is Scavenger's Reign. And Scavenger's Reign is animation, which, there was a point where I said I didn't like animation, and more I'm finding I really like some of the stuff I've seen as of late. This was a miniseries from 2023. It was initially on Paramount, and now it's on Netflix and Max. If you go into IMDb, it has an 8.7 rating out of 10. Most things never get that high. And it just says the crew of a damaged deep space freighter are stranded on a beautiful but dangerous planet. The animation reminds me a lot of the Heavy Metal movie, the first one. It's the alien ecosystem is beautiful and stunning. The story is great. There's so much symbolism into it. They're short episodes. They're like 24 minutes or something like that. There's 12 episodes, and it is just an astonishing thing to watch. It's one of my favorite things I've watched this year. I was absolutely blown away on numerous levels by this series. Scavenger's Reign, Reign. So go check it out on Netflix. Maybe they'll pick it up for a second season. It does not so much, it doesn't really end on a cliffhanger. It ends where they could take off from that point, though. And I would love to see another season of this because it was just beautiful. All right, back to the show. All right, so we are down to the last third here of this primer episode. I want to make sure I get everything in. So we talked about the documentary, my book. Like I said, I had to start from scratch when Mike asked me that question. And that question actually originates with Jeff Ritzmann, which actually originates with George Hansen. I'll get to that in a minute. But that I'm hoping to have done this year. I really, really hope to have it done maybe by the end of the summer. I'm just so completely overwhelmed, and most of it's written. I am currently just kind of piecing together the very early time of my life, which I don't remember much of. I found a lot of pictures, and I am currently going through all the letters I had from different people back then. And it's weird because they'll be responding to obviously to stuff I wrote that I have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm like, what? I wish I saw the letters I wrote, you know. So there's clearly stuff I just don't remember. I've been able to reconnect with a couple of people too. So that's been kind of
cool.
neat. Yeah. So I just found someone in Finland I used to write to, and sent her one of her letters, and she was like, "Wow," you know, like. But some people I can't find. I have no idea if they're still around, you know, unfortunately. But yeah, once I get through those, I will do a final read-through, have it proofread. The art is already done. Matt Festa, who is a fantastic artist and occasionally comes on here as a co-host, did the artwork. You can find his work at Tiamat's Garden on Blue Sky, Facebook, and Instagram. And yeah, he's just incredible artist. So hopefully this year that'll be out. So let's see, and as far as regular people, I mean, I would say you, Chris, and Saxon are probably the most regular I go to.
At this point, probably, yeah. At one point, I think it was
Josh and Red Pill.
Josh, yeah, Red Pill, yeah.
Who are still on. Josh is ultra busy, like so many of us are at this point.
Yeah.
And Barbara Fisher's a regular on the show. Matt, like I said, has been a little more regular on the show. Occasionally we, reach out to like Rosian. But the initial, I wasn't sure how well a roundtable would go. And I think the first roundtable was Mike Hughes, Joshua Cutchin, and Summer, who was going by Summer Snape at the time. And it went really well. And then I think the second one was me, Mike, Josh, and Red Pill. And Red Pill had been supporting the show on the Daily Grail, which he still writes for. And he also has his art, Absurd by Design, out there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he's a great illustrator, and anybody who wants a great illustrator definitely should check him out.
Yeah, they did that tarot deck with Greg Bishop and Josh, and he illustrated all of that. He just did Lear's book, the Malevolent Aliens book from a couple of weeks ago. That was his artwork. So he did Greg Bishop's other book. What was the name of it? The last book Bishop put out. Has a really awesome cover that Miguel did.
Right, was that the one that he did with Gorightly?
No.
Adamski?
No, not A for Adamski. That was the contact he won.
He also did that.
He might have, yeah. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry.
I know, I'm blanking too.
But so yeah, there's a lot of people who are regulars on the show. Some of them, come and go. Like Shirley Black used to be on fairly regularly. Hopefully, I'm going to have her back soon. Steph Young used to be on somewhat regularly. I have mostly lost touch with her. I had talked to her a little while ago, and I seem to have lost touch with her again, unfortunately. There was a lot of stuff going on with her. And I'm kind of just a big question mark at this point. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other people that I'm currently blanking. I mean, Greg Bishop has been on regularly.
Right.
So, there's a bunch of people I will regularly draw from when I think, this is something that will interest them.
I mean, back when I was just a listener, there were some people that came in and out too, I think. Over time. Absolutely. It's been great to have those sort of, different voices come in.
And Vincent Treewell is another one who's on semi-regularly. He also is responsible for writing the recaps for the show.
Yep.
And he has his own podcast called The Strange Part with Vincent Treewell. So as far as other shows that we're sort of like friends with here, and also include some people who are regularly on the show. The 6 Degrees of John Keel, which is currently on hiatus, which is Barbara Fisher.
Barbara Fisher's, yeah.
She is finishing a book and has put the show on hiatus. But so she actually wrote and said that it means she's going to be on this show more, which I was perfectly happy with. So. She's also potentially moving up here, so she may be doing some stuff in person. Conspiranormal, which is Adam Sane.
Yes.
Adam's not on a lot.
Stevenson.
But he is on occasionally, and he does the Strange Realities Conference every year in now November.
Yes.
The Brothers of the Serpent, Snake Brothers.
Yes.
Love having them on. They delve more into the ancient mystery stuff, but we've, I mean, they've had their own weird experiences, and we've had some very different types of shows with them. We also did some of the Exploring Missing 411 stuff with them. And let's see who else.
And Marty Garza also,
Yes.
when you did the show with Marty, who's their sort of UFO guy, that's a great show.
Yes, yeah. And Marty's also a fellow metalhead, so that makes that fun too.
Yep.
But yeah, the shows with Marty Garza are absolutely amazing from them. Already mentioned Strange Familiars, and Katie of the Night's been on a few times. She has a YouTube channel just called Katie of the Night. Most of it's reviewing like Italian horror movies and stuff. Radio Mysterioso is
Greg Bishop's show.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brain just went nuts on a different platter.
That's okay. Yeah. It intermittently comes out whenever.
Right. Strange Dominions, which is Octavian's show, which is also kind of intermittent and more occult focused. He's been on a bunch of times. The Saucer Life, which is Aaron Gullius's fantastic show on the history of like contactees and flying saucers and stuff. Aaron and Mike Cleland come on at least once a year to do a UFO history show. We meant to do just one because I thought they'd work real well together because they had different approaches to the stuff. And I don't know why I thought we could get UFO history into one show, but I don't know how many shows there are now, but we do one every year now as the.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Right after the anniversary show, it's always the next show, and we talk about the stuff that's happened in the last year, which unfortunately mostly has just been disclosure stuff.
Right. I feel like over the past few years, at least with Aaron, it's more and more. He's like, "Oh, nothing happened this year."
Yeah, exactly. And Hidden Experience is Mike Clelland's podcast, which he did for a long time, and then he stopped. But now he has started that back up. And The Seeker and the Skeptic. They've only been on once, but they have now relocated to about an hour or so away from me. So we're gonna be doing more stuff in the future.
Cool.
I just want to give credit here to a few people before we go into anything else. The intro for the show that has been used for years now is the vocalist for Psyche Corporation does that. And not only is she a close friend, but I also mixed and mastered her music, was basically managing her for years. She's sort of on hiatus now, busy doing other things. Every once in a while, she'll write a new song. But she does the intro, and a guy named Andrew Ham just recently redid the intro. He just took it and made it sound even better.
Yeah,
so,
that's cool.
I really like what he did with that, and I'm glad he did that. The outro music at one point was always Psyche Corporation. First Whirring World, then Whirring World or Nightmares. It took me a while to think, hey, I have all these other bands that would be perfectly happy with me using their music. The music does not appear on the YouTube version of this show. And the reason for that is that YouTube is a pain in the ass with it. So I got tired of fighting with them, and I just took the music off the shows for YouTube. It is not all metal or anything like that. It's from all different styles of music. And if the person on has music, like I've played a bunch of Josh's big band music and stuff that he has done, it's whatever. I don't tend to play. I try not to play really heavy stuff because I have a music show for that. Oh yeah, I have a music show. It just turned 30 years old, and that's the lastexit.org. And that's what this came from, as we talked about last week.
Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, that's those. Oh, and yeah, we should probably talk about Jeff Ritzman.
Yes.
So Jeff, and actually there is merchandise on the page. If you go to wheretheroadgo.com, there are t-shirts, all kinds of stuff, posters, whatever you want. There's five designs, 3 from Timothy Renner, who's also an amazing artist, and 2 from Jeff Ritzman. And whereas I asked, Tim if he would design some stuff for me, and he did. He also did one for Last Exit that's amazing. He had offered to let me use his artwork, and I said, "Oh, can I use this one?" He's like, "Oh, I can make one better," and he did. He made one better for Last Exit that was perfect. But Jeff had done 2 designs. Is it 2 designs? I think it's only 2 designs he did, just because he loved the show. And I had never heard Paratopia when it was on. I didn't know who they were, although I did participate in Project Core, which they did.
Yes.
I didn't know who did it. A friend of mine sent it to me, and I submitted the story about the weird light in the field in the back and the shaking moon. And I still have that entry. That'll end up in the appendix of the book. So I found out about Jeff because I was listening to Project Archivist. They did a couple-part episode with him. And I was like, man, this guy's experience is like, the feel is similar. Yep. I felt the same way about Mike Cleland, oddly enough. Like, even though we're not having the same experiences, like, I feel like I need to talk to this person. And I contacted Rojan, and Rojan's like, yeah, I don't know. He kind of like doesn't really do paranormal stuff anymore, but here's his contact info. And then we started talking, and he was like, yeah, I'll come on and talk about this. And as I've been listening back to these old Paratopia, I realized that their approach was very much the same approach that Where Did the Road Go takes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, now I understand why Jeff liked this show so much, because it was basically a continuation of that show, even though I had never heard it. But they're the ones that exposed all the stuff with Emma Woods. They brought out all the hypnosis stuff. Like I said, it was really
this was this was Jeff Ritzman and Jeremy Vaney with Paratopia.
Yes. And this is what you can find on Jeremy Vaney's Our Undoing radio feed, along with occasional monologues from Jeremy from now. And Jeremy's been on the show a bunch of times.
Archive on there, or is he slowly releasing it still?
He's slowly releasing it still. He's up to the episodes where they were charging for them.
Yeah. Okay.
And why I never asked Jeff for them, I don't know. But Jeff and I got along really well. I never talked to Jeremy while Jeff was alive. And it was one of those.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was weird because Jeff always said, man, you and Jeremy, I'm not sure if you would hate each other or really get along. And I like Jeremy. He's not Jeff, but I like Jeremy, and I appreciate his sense of humor. But I could see why he thought that. Like, after I talked to Jeremy, I'm like, no, I could totally see why he would have thought that.
Sure.
I miss Jeff. I miss Jeff a lot. His ideas he had a great way of thinking about this stuff. He was very open-minded about it. And when I listen to those episodes, I'm just like, man, it just kills me that I can't just ask him questions.
Yeah. And if people don't know, he passed suddenly, was it 3 years ago?
Yeah, something
4?
like that.
Yeah.
He had tweeted, I've never been in so much pain in my life. And I thought, well, he did something stupid and hurt himself. Turns out he had stomach cancer.
Yeah.
And like a day later, he was gone. And I felt bad for thinking that. And I said something to Jeremy, and Jeremy's like, don't. I thought the same thing. He's like, I didn't even know. And Jeremy was his best friend. So,
yeah, it happens. Yeah.
But Jeff was definitely a big influence on the show, and he was on it regularly.
He was, yeah.
For a bit, and he would often get out of it because it would almost become toxic to him, like the subject matter, not the show, but like just thinking about the UFO stuff and everything. He would almost get obsessed with it. He talked about that on some of the shows as well.
Oh, he totally did. I remember those shows very well. I think that was right. Was before before I'd come on the show, and before I'd met you, and I remember being really struck by that particular show. I think he was talking about his experiences and how they impacted him. Yeah, absolutely. I remember that.
How it almost ruined his life, almost destroyed his marriage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so he sometimes I'd just kind of like not have him on for a bit because I figured he probably needs a break, because he almost always said yes if I asked him.
Right.
And so that's Jeff Ritzman. And again, I highly recommend Paratopia. They have some brilliant stuff in there. And I'm really glad Jeremy is releasing them, because that stuff needs to be out there. And actually, there is, on the Mark Pilkington episode, there is a story Jeff tells about his day, or the day before, that is so funny it had me in tears. And it's one of those things, but it's one of those things where he repeatedly hurt himself, and was exactly the type of thing I was thinking happened when he posted that tweet.
Right.
Because who tweets when they're like going into the hospital? Why, more information, let us know that it's serious.
Yeah.
But so I think is he the only one we have regular I think we've lost, luckily?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, there are several people that you interviewed that unfortunately.
Yes.
But you've also interviewed some people who are sort of famous elderly people.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. When they're in their 80s and they're on the show, it's,
Yes.
So, other things, real quick. Someone had asked if I could announce, guests coming up, and no, because I don't know who's coming on. And I also feel like I'm jinxing myself.
Right.
Even this, I asked patrons if, when I put this, patrons get the show a week early. I put the first primer up. I said, is there anything else people think we should cover? And we're going to cover that in the Patreon segment. But I said we're recording Tuesday, and we're actually recording Thursday.
Right. Yep. That was my fault.
Yeah, but I'm just saying this is how that works, so I don't like to announce anything.
Exactly, yes.
Because I feel like the second I do, the universe is going to be like, oh, you think so, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I feel the same way oftentimes.
So unless it's in the bag, I don't want to announce it, especially if it's like a tentative thing where I'm like, ooh, I'm really looking forward to this. That means there's more chance something's going to go wrong.
Right.
And there have been times where I've asked someone to come on the show and they've been like, yeah, and then never responded again. And I'm like, okay, This happens with music stuff too. I'll message somebody and be like, hey, want to come on the show? And they'll be like, yeah, that would be awesome. And then they don't respond anymore. And I'm like, okay, well,
yep.
Like, I don't know if you're just, bad at responding to emails like I am, or if you just don't care. And I am bad at responding to messages. So please don't think I don't care. I do care. I read everything. I just don't always have time to respond to everything. And my memory sucks. Too much going on in there.
What about your all of your employees?
Yeah.
Your production house.
Me, myself, and I.
Right? Yes, exactly.
And I did mention in the last episode, John Shooter is responsible for the design of the website, which he also did. He just offered to do one day and did a beautiful job. He is
it's awesome.
Master of website stuff and a cool guy. He's been on a few times as well, always with very interesting, unique historical stuff. So as far the other thing people will ask is, when am I going to have such and such person on? The problem sometimes is like Dean Radin. Why have I never had Dean Radin on? Well, I think Dean Radin's really interesting, but I've never read any of his books. Mm. And I feel like I should read at least one of his books, and I now have a couple of his books to read. So I want to read at least one of his books before I have him on the show.
Totally understandable.
And so sometimes it's that. Sometimes, like Jenny Randall's, I've read tons of Jenny Randall's books. I'd love to have her on, but she never responds. So I don't know if she just doesn't. The only show I've ever heard her do in recent times was I can't even remember the name of the guy, but it was someone that she knew going way back.
Right.
So it was like a personal friend of hers that she did the show. So a lot of times it's like, and someone like Whitley Strieber, which is one of the more common people I hear. Why don't you have Whitley Strieber on? I'm not against having Whitley Strieber on. I just feel like there's so much Whitley Strieber out there that
it's true.
It's like, am I going to really have a conversation he hasn't had before? I don't know. And I would like to have him on, but it's not a priority for me because I have all these other interesting people that aren't already all out there. Same with Graham Hancock. When we did the John Anthony West benefit, I forget the guy who put that on, but I talked to Graham for a bit and I said, would you come on the show? And he said yes, and gave me his direct email. I've been meaning to have Robert Schock back on, and I only had him on in like the first year of the show. It's just there's a lot to juggle in booking people.
Sure.
And there's a lot of newer stuff that comes out that I want to talk about, or books I've read that I want to, people I want to have on. And again, as far as saying who's coming up, I had a book company send me a book a couple of weeks ago. I read about half of it, went, yeah, this is really interesting. Because they had asked me if I wanted to interview the author, and I said, yeah, this is interesting. I'll interview them. And that's where it stopped.
Yeah.
I'm like,
are
you gonna get back to me with this? So I don't like to announce those things. Trying to think what else there is here. So that's that. As far as influential books, I mean, we've done a few shows on must-read books that I recommend seeking out. For me, I think that books like The Trickster and the Paranormal by Hansen is very important.
Sure, Trickster and the Paranormal, Dynamic Reality, Patrick Harper.
Yep. Valet stuff, Keel stuff, Valet stuff minus the new book.
The Trinity one. Yeah, that's not a great book.
So, and I mean, there's, I'm blanking on who else here. There's so many good books.
Oh gosh, so many. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jenny Randall several times.
Yes. Yeah. Mind Monsters. Mind Monster by Jenny Randall in particular.
I think you mentioned, it was mentioned last show, but yeah, Kenneth Ring's Omega Project.
Yep. Obviously Strieber's early stuff is fantastic.
The
later stuff is not that it's bad. I really liked Solving the Communion Enigma, which apparently most people did not buy, according to Strieber. I thought that was fantastic. Jeffrey Kripal's stuff is great.
That's what he says about all his stuff, is that not enough people buy it.
Jeffrey Kripal did the book with him, Supernatural,
yes,
which was great.
I think Kripal's work. Yep, absolutely.
Yep. The LSD, or not LSD, DMT, the Spirit Molecule book is very important.
Rick Strassman, yeah.
I'm very fond of The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, which we're supposed to do a show on eventually. So yeah, there's and like I said, Where the Footprints End from Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner is a must read for that subject. Ecology of Souls from actually all of Josh's stuff. All of Josh's stuff is fantastic. Yeah. All of Tim's stuff is fantastic. There are no bad books.
It really
there.
is. Both of those guys, yeah, for sure.
I mean, they are the literary future of this stuff. I mean, I think people are going to look back at their books, especially Where the Footprints End and Ecology of Souls 20, 30 years from now, and be like, these guys were the guys on top right here. The same way we look at Valet and Keel now.
Yep, agreed.
So, all right. I think that concludes the primer part of the show. I mean, we could do 10 primer episodes if we wanted to get in all the different theories and ideas.
Right.
And stuff,
there's so much more, but yeah, no, I think that was that covered quite a bit.
Yes, and people. Like I said, I wanted to mention the people involved, and I'm sure I forgot some people, and I didn't mean to, just because they're on different platters of my brain. But and obviously,
without besides the stuff that specifically has to do with, I don't know, UFO things, I think most of the shows, can kind of be listened to on their own, because they don't necessarily have, it's not like anybody solved this stuff.
Right.
Over the past 15 years. So, that's the cool thing about the archive, I think, is that, you have a lot of interviews with authors, about their books. And so, it can kind of be approached at any time. It's evergreen in that sense.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, I felt like a primer episode would cover some of the basics. And some of the regularly asked questions.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this, whether you're a longtime listener or a new listener, and I hope it answered some questions and shows you where we stand on this stuff. And again, I feel like this stuff has been studied for decades with these boxes around it of this is ghosts, this is whatever, and nothing new is coming of it. And that's the point where we really need to shed these boxes and start looking at the data and stop putting our beliefs into it, stop trying to fit it into certain paradigms. And that's the way forward to learning more about this stuff.
Yes.
Again, as Greg Bishop said, ask better questions.
That's right.
So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons for their support. Without you, this show would not be possible. And I want to give a shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Martha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Andrew Malone, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Illuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, CJ, Corey Nelson, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, John Hewling, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Brady, Mr. Weird, Ole Andre Olar, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Roland Belstadt, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sarah Horgan, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Stevie Norman, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic Podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, The Esoteric Book Club Podcast, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varosh K., Victoria, Vincent Treewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Colin Karras, and Craig Sagastumi. Thank you all so very much for the support. All right, we answer some Patreon questions, questions asked by Patreons in a Patreon segment for this show. Help us out. Become a patron. Go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the big Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content and the show a week early. There's also ways to donate there, and if you go into the About, my Amazon wish list is up there. And thanks to Michael Frisky, who has sent me all kinds of books off that list that are going to end up as shows at some point down the line. I want to welcome a few new patrons, and I can't remember who I welcomed last week, so I'm just going to go down the whole list I have here. Martha, Billuminati, Dave Baxter, and Anne. Thank you all for joining us. I hope we answered a lot of the questions people had, especially if you're new to the show. I hope these 2 primer episodes help. And we're going to continue on for as long as I possibly can with this, and who knows what new questions and new things we'll come up with over time. So www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. I'll see you all next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.